The sun was warm that afternoon. The sky was clear. The street was quiet. Birds were singing in the trees. Everything looked peaceful in Willow Park, a beautiful neighborhood in the city. The Johnson family drove slowly down the road. Their car was clean but old. Their smiles were hopeful. They had dressed nicely. The father wore a buttoned shirt. The mother wore a long dress. The children sat quietly in the back seat, holding hands. They had come to see a house, their dream house. Mr. Johnson, a hard-working bank employee, looked at the paper in his hand. It had the address, the price, and the time of the visit. 3 p.m. We're right on time, he said with a smile. Mrs. Johnson, a schoolteacher, nodded. It's beautiful here, isn't it? The children looked out the window. The lawns were green. The houses were big and clean. Flowers grew on every porch. It looked perfect. I like it, whispered little Naomi, the youngest. I want to live here. Her brother David was quiet. He was 12, smart and serious. He didn't speak much, but his eyes were full of hope too. They pulled up in front of house number 47, a cream-colored house with white windows and a blue door. It looked like something from a magazine. Let's go, Mr. Johnson said. He took a deep breath and opened the car door. At the same time, a man stood behind a curtain across the street, watching. His name was Mr. Andrews, an old war veteran. He lived alone. Every afternoon he drank tea by the window. He saw everything that happened on the street. Today, he watched the Johnson family step out of their car. He narrowed his eyes. He watched the father straighten his shirt, the mother fix her daughter's hair. He watched the children looking up at the house. He sipped his tea and kept watching. The Johnsons walked to the front door. Mr. Johnson rang the bell once. They waited. After a minute, the door opened. A man in a suit looked out. The realtor, Mr. Gregg. His smile froze when he saw them. Yes, he said quickly. We're the Johnson family, Mr. Johnson said kindly. We have an appointment to see this house. 3 o'clock. The realtor glanced at his watch, then at the family. Ah, right. Let me check. He pulled out his phone and scrolled for a moment, then looked back up. I'm sorry, he said. There must have been a mistake. The house was sold this morning. It's no longer available. Mr. Johnson blinked. But we got confirmation yesterday. You said to come at 3. I understand, sir, but things move fast in this market. Someone made an early offer. We accepted it. Mrs. Johnson stepped forward. We were ready to pay full price. We have everything. Ready? The realtor nodded, but his smile was now cold. Again, I'm sorry. It's already done. He began to close the door. Naomi looked up and said softly, but I love this house. The door shut. Silence. Across the street. Mr. Andrews was still watching. He had seen the whole thing. He had seen the realtor's expression change. He had seen the polite father, the calm mother, the quiet children, and he knew the truth. The house was not sold, but something else had spoken louder than money. Their skin. Mr. Johnson walked back to the car slowly. His shoulders were stiff. His face was still. Not angry, not crying, just still. He opened the car door for his family. They sat in silence. Then he started the engine. As they drove away, Naomi whispered, Did we do something wrong? Mrs. Johnson turned and pulled her close. No, baby, not at all. David looked out the window, his jaw tight. He didn't say a word. Inside house number 47, the realtor stood behind the closed door. He sighed and wiped his forehead. Not in this neighborhood, he muttered to himself. Then he texted someone. All clear. They're gone. Across the street, Mr. Andrews placed his teacup down and looked at the blue door of house number 47. His hand trembled slightly. He thought about how many times he had stayed silent in his life. Silent during arguments, silent when unfair things happened around him, silent because it was easier. But today, that silence felt heavier. He turned from the window and walked slowly to his study. He sat at his desk and pulled out a piece of paper. He began to write. Dear Mr. Johnson, I saw what happened today. I saw how they turned you away. I've lived here for 40 years, and I've never seen a family come here and be treated like that. The house is not sold. That man lied. I can't fix what happened, but I can tell the truth. He paused, then wrote more. I stayed quiet too long. I've watched things happen and told myself they weren't my business. But today, it was, you didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't want you here. I'm sorry. I don't know if you'll ever see this letter, but I needed to write it. For you, and for myself. He signed it. A neighbor who should have spoken sooner. He folded the letter and placed it in an envelope. Then he looked at it for a long time. He wanted to walk it over, to say something, to do something. But he was scared, so instead he placed it in a drawer and closed it. Meanwhile, the Johnson family sat in their small apartment, silent. Mr. Johnson stood by the window, staring out. Mrs. Johnson sat at the table, her hand over her heart. Naomi drew a picture of the blue house with flowers. David tore his picture in half. Outside the city, lights blinked. They didn't know it yet, but fate had seen it all, and fate was not done. Mr. Andrews sat alone in his quiet living room. The tea beside him had gone cold, but he didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the drawer in the corner of the room, the one that now held a letter he was too afraid to send. The words he had written still echoed in his mind. You didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't want you here. He had seen the pain in the father's eyes. He had seen the confusion on the little girl's face. He had seen it all, and done nothing. And now, that silence was pressing on his chest like a weight. Mr. Andrews wasn't a cruel man. He had fought in wars. He had lost friends. He believed in fairness, or at least he told himself that. But somewhere along the way, he had learned to look the other way. This world is broken, he often said. But he never tried to fix it until now, maybe. That night, he sat at his desk again. He opened the drawer, took out the envelope, looked at the name written on the front, Mr. Johnson. He thought about walking across town to find them. He thought about asking the realtor for their contact. But then a louder voice inside him said, "What if this causes trouble? What if they blame you?" He placed the envelope back inside and closed the drawer again. Across town, the Johnson family was sitting down for dinner. The mood was quiet. Even the children weren't speaking much. Michelle, the mother, tried to smile. "Tomorrow's a new day," she said gently. Mr. Johnson forced a smile too. "Maybe we'll find another house." David frowned. "But what if it happens again? What if they just keep lying?" There was silence. Then Naomi spoke softly. "Why didn't they like us?" Mrs. Johnson leaned in and held her hand. "Sweetheart, they don't know us. They only saw our skin." Naomi nodded slowly. "But we're good people." "Yes," Mrs. Johnson whispered. "And someday, they'll see that too." Next day, Mr. Andrews watched from his window again. No new families visited the house. No moving trucks came. No signs changed. The house was still empty. That made him feel worse. They had lied. For nothing, he closed the curtain in frustration, then turned back to his desk. This time, he opened the drawer, not to hide the letter, but to read it again. He whispered to himself, "If I don't speak, then I'm no different." He pulled out a new envelope. And this time, he added one more line. "If you ever want to talk, I live across from the blue door. I'm sorry for what you went through. I saw it. I remember." He signed it again, a neighbor who should have spoken sooner. Meanwhile, at the school, David Johnson sat alone at lunch. No one had joined his table all week. He opened his sandwich slowly, pretending not to care. From across the room, the janitor, an older woman named Miss Gwen, was sweeping near the vending machines. She had seen David every day, quiet, alone. That afternoon, she left a folded note inside his backpack. It read, "I see you, young man. You're not alone. Keep your head up." David read it once. Then again, he looked around, wondering who had written it. But he smiled. Just a little dot. It was the first smile in days. Later that evening, Mr. Andrews finally did it. He put on his coat, picked up the envelope, and walked out the door. His hands were shaking. He wasn't sure what he would say. He didn't even know if they'd be home. But he walked anyway. At the same time, the Johnsons were finishing dinner. Naomi was drawing again. David was reading a book. There was a knock at the door. Mr. Johnson opened it slowly. There stood Mr. Andrews, holding the envelope. He looked nervous. His voice was soft. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. I live near the house you visited the other day, the one on Willow Street." Mr. Johnson looked surprised. "Yes." Mr. Andrews cleared his throat. "I saw what happened and I've been thinking about it ever since. I already for you." He handed him the envelope. Mr. Johnson took it slowly. For a moment, they both just stood there. Then Mr. Johnson said quietly, "Thank you." Mr. Andrews nodded and turned to leave. But as he walked away, Mr. Johnson opened the envelope and began to read. Inside were the words he needed to hear. "You didn't imagine it. You didn't do anything wrong. I saw them lie. I saw the way they looked at you, and I'm sorry I didn't speak up then, but I'm speaking now." Mr. Johnson folded the letter gently and closed his eyes. It wasn't justice. It wasn't a home. But it was something. It was truth. Later that night, Michelle read the letter. Tears came to her eyes. She looked at her husband. "He didn't have to do this, I know," he said. "But he did." Outside, the stars were quiet. The blue house still stood, cold and empty. But something had shifted. The silence had broken. A stranger had spoken, and sometimes that's where change begins. The next morning, the sun rose over the city like it always did. But in the Johnson home, everything still felt heavy. Mr. Johnson folded the letter Mr. Andrews had given them and placed it carefully in a drawer. He didn't say much. He just kissed his kids on their heads and left for work. Mrs. Johnson packed lunches with quiet hands. Naomi watched her closely. "Mom, why do people not like us?" Michelle stopped what she was doing for a moment. She sighed. "Sweetheart, sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand." Naomi frowned. "But we didn't do anything." "I know, baby. And that's the hardest part." David and Naomi got ready for school. They didn't speak much in the car. The new school was big, clean, and full of new faces. But none of those faces had smiled at them yet. As they walked into the building, Naomi gripped David's hand tightly. "Stay with me until we get to my class," she asked. He nodded. Of course, Naomi's classroom was bright and colorful. The walls had charts and drawings made by other kids. The teacher, Miss Cora, greeted her with a soft smile, but didn't say much else. Naomi looked for a seat. There were 2 empty chairs. She sat in one. Another girl looked at her, then stood up and moved to another table. Naomi blinked slowly. The teacher noticed but said nothing. At lunch, Naomi sat at the edge of the table with her lunchbox in front of her. No one joined her. The other kids laughed and played and passed her like she wasn't even there. She opened her sandwich but didn't feel hungry anymore. She looked down and whispered to herself, I didn't do anything wrong. Across the building, David was walking through the hallway. He passed groups of students standing together. Some looked at him, some didn't. He heard whispers. That's the new kid. Did you see where he lives? He doesn't talk much. In the classroom, no one sat next to him. At lunch, no one said a word to him. When he raised his hand in class, the teacher looked surprised, like she didn't expect him to be smart. And when he answered the question correctly, a few kids raised their eyebrows. One boy said under his breath, "Oh, he's not dumb." David heard it. He didn't react, but inside, his chest felt tight. He sat alone at lunch again. He opened his bag and found a folded note. It was the same handwriting as before. Simple, kind, I saw you reading yesterday. You looked strong. Don't let their silence change you. He looked around the cafeteria. Far across the room, near the vending machines. The janitor, Miss Gwen, gave him a small wave. He gave a tiny nod in return. That note became the only thing that made him feel seen that day. Back at home, Naomi and David didn't talk much about school, but Michelle noticed. She always did. That night, Naomi finally said, I don't think they like me there. Michelle sat beside her. Did someone say something? No, Naomi whispered, but no one says anything. They just, move away from me. Michelle held her close. Sometimes the quiet hurts more than the words, doesn't it? Naomi nodded. David spoke from the couch. They don't think we belong there. Mr. Johnson looked up from his newspaper. Why would they think that? David shrugged. Because we're different. And they think different is wrong. There was silence in the room. Then Mr. Johnson stood up, walked over to his son, and sat beside him. Listen to me, he said. Being different doesn't mean being less. It just means you see the world in your own way. And that's a strength, not a weakness. David looked at him. Then why do they treat it like one? Mr. Johnson sighed. Because they haven't learned better yet. But they will one day, Naomi asked softly. When? Michelle answered. Maybe sooner than you think. The next day at school, something small changed. During art class, Naomi was drawing quietly when her crayon broke. She looked around, unsure what to do. A girl named Emily saw her from across the table. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she got up and walked over. Here, she said, offering Naomi a new crayon. Naomi looked up in surprise. Thank you. Emily nodded and walked back to her seat. It was small, just a crayon. But Naomi felt like someone had finally opened a little door. That same day, David was reading a book in the hallway during a break when one of the boys, who had ignored him before, came and sat nearby. The boy glanced at his book and said, That's a hard one. I tried reading it once. David didn't look up. It's not hard if you take it slow. The boy nodded. What's your name again, David? I'm Liam. There was a pause. You play chess? Liam asked. David looked at him, unsure. Yeah, a little. Cool, Liam said. We have a club after school. You should check it out. Then he walked away. David stared. After him, unsure if it was a joke or an invitation, but still, it was something. At home that evening, Naomi came running in with her drawing. Mom, look, a girl helped me today. Michelle smiled wide. That's amazing. David said nothing, but he opened his bag and carefully took out the second note from Miss Gwen. He placed it in his drawer next to the first. He didn't say it out loud, but inside, he felt it. I'm not invisible anymore. Far across the city, Mr. Andrews sat by his window again. He hadn't seen the Johnsons in days, but he thought of them often. He wondered how the kids were doing in school. He wondered if the letter helped. He wondered if he had done enough. He poured himself a cup of tea, then walked to his study. He opened his drawer and started writing another letter. Dear Johnson family, I hope you're well. I want you to know I haven't forgotten you. I'm still watching, and this time, I'm not looking away. He didn't know if he'd send it, but writing it made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he was changing to. It had been a quiet week in Willow Park. The houses stood still. The flowers bloomed, and the air carried the smell of fresh-cut grass. But in one small apartment across the city, something was about to be found, something that would change everything. David was cleaning his school bag. Crumpled worksheets, broken pencils, and old snack wrappers were all stuck at the bottom. Why do I carry all this junk? He mumbled to himself. He pulled everything out, tossing things aside. Then he found a folded piece of paper that didn't look like his. It was old, a little yellow at the edges. It had no name on the front. He opened it slowly. Dear Mr. Johnson, I saw what happened that day. I saw how the realtor lied. The house wasn't sold. He just didn't want to sell it to you because of your skin. David stopped reading. His heart beat faster. He read more. I've lived here for 40 years. I thought things had changed, but they haven't. I didn't speak then, but I am speaking now. I'm sorry. At the bottom, it said, a neighbor who should have spoken sooner. David stared at the letter. Mom, he shouted. Dad. His parents came running. What happened? Mr. Johnson asked, concerned. David handed them the paper. As Michelle read it, Her hands trembled. Mr. Johnson read over her shoulder, his jaw tight. This is about the house on Willow Street, he said quietly. But who wrote it? Michelle asked. David pointed. He didn't sign his name, just said he was a neighbor. They all sat in silence. Then Mr. Johnson said, he saw everything, and stayed quiet. Until now. Michelle looked at David. Where did you find this? In my bag. I don't know how it got there. They all looked at each other, and for a long moment, no one spoke. At that very time, across the city, Mr. Andrews sat by his window, holding a fresh envelope in his hand. He had written a second letter, a better one, but now, it didn't matter, because the first letter was missing. He had searched his desk, his drawers, under the table, everywhere. But it was gone. He was sure he had left it sealed in his drawer. Had it fallen? He dropped it outside. Worse, had someone found it? His hands shook. His heart raced. He stared across the street at the same blue door of house number Y, the house that was still for sale, and still empty. He sighed deeply. Maybe it's better this way. But part of him hoped that the Johnsons had read it. And maybe it had made a difference. Back at the Johnsons' home, Michelle sat with the letter in her hand. She read it again and again. This man, he saw it, she whispered. He saw what they did to us. Mr. Johnson nodded. But why didn't he say anything then? Maybe he was afraid, she replied. David looked up. Isn't that the same as being part of it? Mr. Johnson looked at his son carefully. Sometimes silence feels safer than speaking, but silence is a choice too. David frowned. He saw what happened to us. That means he knew. That means someone else knows the truth. Michelle's eyes lit up. That's right. If we can find out who wrote this, maybe we can find proof. David stood up quickly. I'm going to that street now, Michelle asked. After school tomorrow, he said. I'll find out who saw it happen. Someone knows more. The next day, David walked slowly through Willow Street after school. He passed house. #47. It looked exactly the same. Empty, clean, cold. He looked around. Across the street stood a house with white curtains and a front porch with plants. He paused. Something about it felt familiar. He walked up to the porch and rang the bell. No answer. He was about to leave when the door creaked open. Mr. Andrews stood there, surprised. Yes, he said, gently. David hesitated. Did you see what happened here a few weeks ago? When a family came to see the house? Mr. Andrews looked at him carefully. His eyes narrowed just a little. I did, he said softly. David's heart raced. Did you write this? He held up a picture of the letter he had taken on his phone. Mr. Andrews's face changed. He stepped back slightly. His hands trembled. I did, he finally admitted. I dropped it, didn't I? David nodded slowly. My parents read it, he said. It meant something. A lot, actually. Mr. Andrews looked down. I should have said something that day, but I didn't. I'm sorry. David asked, why now? Because I've been quiet for too long, the old man replied. I saw what that man did. I saw the way he looked at your father, the way he shut the door, and I knew it wasn't about money. David stared at him. Then will you tell others? He asked. Will you tell someone else what you saw? Mr. Andrews paused. I'm not sure if people will listen. David took a deep breath. Then maybe it's time to make them. Later that night, Mr. Andrews sat at his desk. He wrote a third letter. This one was for the housing office. He told them everything, about what he saw, about what he heard, about the lie. He signed his full name at the bottom, Mr. Walter Andrews. He sealed it in an envelope and placed it by the door. He wasn't afraid anymore. At home, David gave the original letter back to his father. Mr. Johnson looked at him. You found him? David nodded. He's writing another letter, to tell the truth, this time with his name on it. Michelle smiled. You did good, David. Naomi looked up from her drawings. Does that mean we can get a house now? Mr. Johnson looked at her and smiled sadly. Maybe not right away, but it means we're one step closer. Michelle hugged both kids. And it means people are finally starting to see what we've seen all along. Naomi held up her drawing. It was the same blue house. But this time, she had drawn flowers. In the yard, a welcome mat at the door, and in the corner she had written, Home, someday. The housing office was quiet that morning. Computers hummed softly, and papers rustled under tired hands. Staff moved slowly, pretending not to see each other. In the corner of the room, a woman named Lisa Raymond sat at her desk, typing quietly. Lisa had worked there for 7 years. She was good at her job, fast, careful, polite. But lately she had been carrying something heavy inside her, a secret, one that wasn't hers. But she had seen it, heard it, and now couldn't forget it. It had started 2 weeks ago. She had overheard a conversation in the hallway between her manager and the realtor, Mr. Gregg. Family's name is Johnson, Gregg had said. Showed up on Willow Street. Her manager replied in a low voice. They're not a good fit for that neighborhood. Gregg had nodded. Don't worry. I told them the house was sold. Lisa had paused near the corner, holding a file, listening. Don't let it happen again, her manager had added. Be more careful next time. Lisa had stood frozen in place, heart pounding. She had heard wrong things before, whispers, jokes, quiet lies. But this was different. This was a family being denied a home, because of their skin. For days, Lisa couldn't sleep. She thought about the little girl they had turned away, the polite father, the soft-voiced mother. She didn't know their faces, but she imagined them clearly. She had wanted to speak up, but fear held her still. If she said something, she could lose her job, and this job paid her bills, her rent, her little brother's school fees still. Every time she opened a new file, she saw their name, Johnson, marked with red ink, and a small note beside it, "Do not recommend. Not a match." What did not a match mean? She knew exactly what it meant. It meant black. It meant not wanted here, and that broke something inside her. One afternoon, Lisa stayed late in the office. She walked past the manager's office. The door was half open. Nobody was there. She looked around. Then slowly, she stepped inside. She went straight to the file cabinet in the corner. Her hands were shaking. She pulled out a folder labeled Willow Street number 47. Inside was everything. The application form from the Johnsons, the approval note from the owner, the email from Mr. Greg Sang, family showed up, handled, a final note in red ink, marked unsuitable, keep off future lists. Lisa's stomach turned. They had the approval. The house was theirs until someone saw their skin. She pulled out her phone and took pictures of every page. Then she put everything back and quietly left the office. That night, Lisa couldn't sit still. She paced her apartment, thinking, what should she do? Who could she trust? She remembered seeing the mother, Michelle Johnson, at the office weeks ago. She had come to ask questions. She had been calm, strong, but her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Lisa had watched from behind her desk, frozen. Now, it was time to be brave. She looked at the file photos on her phone, then, carefully, she dialed a number. Michelle Johnson was washing dishes when her phone rang. The number was unknown. Hello? There was silence for a moment. Then a soft, nervous voice said, "Hi, I don't know if you remember me. I work at the housing office. My name is Lisa. I saw what happened to your family, and I want to help." Michelle froze. "Why now?" she asked. Lisa took a breath. "Because I've been afraid. But I found something. Proof, emails, notes. The house was never sold. It was yours. They just didn't want to give it to you." Michelle sat down. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from finally hearing the truth. "I have pictures," Lisa continued. "I don't know what you'll do with them, but I can send them." Michelle whispered, "Yes, please." Lisa asked, "Can I text them to you?" "Yes." Seconds later, Michelle's phone buzzed. One by one, pictures of files appeared on her screen, proof of what she always knew but could never prove, and now, she had it. That night, she showed the pictures to her husband. Mr. Johnson's face was quiet but firm. This is everything," he said. "We can take this to someone, the news, a lawyer, a council member." Michelle nodded, "But only if Lisa is willing to speak." They called her back. Lisa's voice shook. "I don't know if I can speak publicly. I could lose everything." Michelle replied gently, "We understand. You've done more than most already. But if you ever decide to speak, we'll be with you." Lisa whispered, "Thank you." They hung up. Later that night, Michelle sat on the couch holding her phone. David and Naomi joined her. "What's going on?" David asked. Michelle showed him the pictures. He scrolled through them, eyes wide. "This is real. They really blocked us." Michelle nodded. Naomi asked, "Does that mean we can have the house now?" Michelle looked at her gently. "Maybe not yet, but now we can fight for it. With truth." David clenched his fist. "Then we can't stop now." Across town, Lisa stared at her own phone, full of anxiety. Then she opened her email and began typing. 2. Local news tips. Subject: housing discrimination proof. Inside: "Hello, I work at a housing office in this city. I have proof that a black family was denied a home even after approval. Attached are documents, emails, and records showing how it was done. I'm scared, but I'm tired of being silent. If you care about justice, please read this." She hit send. Then she turned off the lights, sat on her bed, and waited. She didn't know what would happen next, but something inside her felt lighter. Because finally, she had spoken. The small grocery store on Pine Street wasn't usually crowded. It was the kind of place where neighbors nodded politely, where cashiers remembered your name, and where time moved a little slower. Mr. Johnson didn't usually shop there, but that evening, he decided to pick up a few things after work. Michelle was cooking dinner, and they were out of milk and eggs. He didn't expect anything unusual. He pushed the cart slowly down the aisle, thinking about everything that had happened. Lisa called, the emails, the photos, the truth, finally written in black and white. But the question still lingered. What now? On the other side of the store, Mr. Walter Andrews was studying a box of tea. His eyes were tired. His coat was too big, but he moved with care, the way older men often do. He turned his cart and rolled toward the dairy section. That's when they saw each other, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Andrews. Both men froze. A beat of silence passed between them. Then Mr. Johnson gave a small, polite nod. Mr. Andrews stepped forward slowly. "Mr. Johnson," he said in a quiet voice, "it's good to see you again." Mr. Johnson replied, "You too." They stood by the milk fridge, not saying anything for a moment. Then Mr. Andrews cleared his throat. "Did you get the letter?" "Yes," Mr. Johnson said. "My son found it. I was afraid it was lost. Mr. Johnson looked him in the eye. You told the truth? That matters. Mr. Andrews looked down. I should have done more. I watched what they did. I said nothing. I waited days before writing that letter. You still wrote it? Mr. Johnson said. Most people wouldn't. There was another pause. Then Mr. Andrews asked softly, How are your children? Mr. Johnson smiled faintly. Naomi's still drawing that blue house. David wants to be a lawyer now. Mr. Andrews gave a small laugh. Smart boy? They're doing okay, Mr. Johnson said. We're all doing okay. Stronger than people expect. They walked side by side to the checkout. The conversation felt natural. Light, even. Mr. Andrews asked. So, what happens next? Mr. Johnson glanced at him. We have proof now. Lisa from the housing office gave us documents. Mr. Andrews looked surprised. She spoke up. She did. Mr. Johnson nodded. She sent the files to the news, too. Mr. Andrews shook his head slowly. Maybe this time, things will actually change. Maybe, Mr. Johnson agreed, but not by themselves. We'll have to keep pushing. They reached the cashier. As the groceries were scanned, Mr. Andrews reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wasn't sure I'd ever give this to you, he said. Mr. Johnson took it and unfolded it. It was another letter, short, but handwritten with care. If anyone asks me what happened that day, I will tell them the truth. I will speak it clearly. I will no longer hide behind my curtain. Walter Andrews. Mr. Johnson looked at him. Thank you, he said. Outside the store, the sky was turning gold. Mr. Johnson and Mr. Andrews stood beside their cars for a few more minutes. I may be old, Mr. Andrews said, but I still have a voice. I want to use it right, even if I'm late. Mr. Johnson smiled. It's never too late. Mr. Andrews nodded. If you need me in court, for interviews, letters, I'll stand beside you. Mr. Johnson held out his hand. Mr. Andrews shook it firmly. In that moment, two men, different in age, background, and history, stood as equals, not just as neighbors, but as allies. That evening, Mr. Johnson returned home with the groceries and the letter. Michelle met him at the door. You're late, she teased. He kissed her cheek. You'll never guess who I ran into. The kids ran in. Did you bring cookies? Naomi asked. Mr. Johnson smiled. Better. I brought something stronger. He handed the second letter to Michelle. She read it slowly, then looked up at him. He's with us. He is, Mr. Johnson said. For real, this time. Later, that night, David read the letter twice. He sat quietly, then said, It's like, people are waking up, Naomi added, even old people. Everyone laughed gently, but it was true. One person had spoken, then another, and the silence, the long, heavy silence that had followed them for weeks, was finally beginning to crack. The next morning, Michelle's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Lisa. News outlet replied, They want to talk to your family. If you're ready, they are too. Michelle looked at her husband. This is it. He nodded. Then, let's speak. Across the city, Mr. Andrews sat by his window, holding a copy of the letter he had given Mr. Johnson. He had written it 5 times before getting the words right. Now he looked out toward the sky, smiled, and whispered to himself, It's not too late to be the man I should have been. The small local news studio smelled like coffee and old paper. Bright lights hung from the ceiling. Cameras were placed at every corner, waiting to capture stories both big and small. But today, something different was happening. Today, the Johnson family was going to speak. Not in private, not in whispers, but in front of the world. Michelle adjusted her blouse while sitting in the waiting room. Her hands were cold. Her heart was pounding. Next to her, Mr. Johnson sat quietly, calm on the outside but thinking deeply inside. He kept going over the words he wanted to say. David was sitting straight, dressed neatly, his hands folded. He had asked to come. He said, They need to hear it from someone my age, too. Naomi sat on Michelle's lap, holding her favorite, drawing the one with the blue house and flowers in the yard. She had insisted on bringing it. A soft voice broke the silence. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, we're ready for you. Inside the studio, everything felt brighter. There was a long table, 2 chairs, microphones. The reporter smiled kindly. She was in her 30s, dressed smartly, and her eyes showed a mix of kindness and seriousness. Thank you for coming, she said. We've read the documents, the letter, the emails. We've verified everything. Michelle nodded. Double quotes, we want to give you space. The reporter continued. Speak freely. Tell your story. Mr. Johnson took a deep breath. Then, slowly, the camera light turned red, and the interview began. The screen showed their faces across thousands of homes. Families sat on couches. Teachers paused staff meetings. CAF TVs turned up the volume. The Johnsons were telling the truth, and people were finally listening. We applied for the house on Willow Street, Michelle began. We were told it was already sold. But it wasn't, Mr. Johnson added. A man across the street, Mr. Andrews, saw everything, and he gave us a letter saying he witnessed the lie. Michelle held up the printed email. This, she said, is proof. The realtor said we weren't a good match. That's a quiet way of saying not your kind. David sat up straight. I'm 12, he said softly. At school, No one would sit with me. They looked at me like I was wrong. But I'm not. He looked directly into the camera. I want to grow up in a world where families like mine aren't rejected just because of our skin. The reporter's voice was quiet. What do you hope people take from this? Mr. Johnson replied, that silence helps no one. That good people need to speak when bad things happen, Michelle said, and that we're not asking for special treatment, just fairness, just a chance. After the interview, the family walked out of the studio into fresh air. The sky above them was bright blue. For the first time in weeks, Michelle felt light, like the truth had finally stretched its arms and touched the sky. By that evening, the interview had gone viral online. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag Willow Street Truth, hashtag Let Them Live, hashtag Justice for the Johnsons people. From all over the country were commenting, I can't believe this still happens. They are so brave. The housing office needs to be investigated. And quietly, in the background, things started to move. At the housing office, Lisa sat at her desk when her manager stormed out of his office. Double quotes, turn off your phones, he barked. No one speaks to the press. But the staff were already reading the story on their screens. Lisa opened her email. A message from HR. Please be available for a meeting tomorrow morning. We will be reviewing your concerns. Lisa's hands trembled, but this time, it wasn't from fear, it was from hope. Far away, in a quiet home on Willow Street, Mr. Andrews watched the interview on his old TV. When David spoke, he sat straighter. In his chair, when Michelle spoke about fairness, he wiped his eyes. He whispered, that boy's going to change the world. He reached for his pen and began writing again, this time not a letter of apology, but a public statement. My name is Walter Andrews. I live across from the house in question. I saw the family arrive. I saw the lie. I confirm every word they said is true. I am not afraid to stand with them. The next day, the statement was published in the local paper. With it came a wave of support. A teacher shared that Naomi was kind and talented. A neighbor from another block admitted he had seen the same realtor lie before. A retired judge called for a legal review of the housing practices in the area. People were no longer silent, because silence had been broken, and truth had walked in. Michelle's phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from the mayor's office. We've seen your interview. We're launching a full investigation into the Willow Street case. We also want to invite your family to City Hall next week, not as guests, as voices of change. David stood near the window that evening, watching cars pass by. Mr. Johnson joined him. People are talking, David said. Do you think it'll last? Mr. Johnson smiled. It only needs to last long enough to change something, even one thing. Naomi came running into the room. Look, she shouted. My teacher asked me to draw something for the school bulletin. She held up a new drawing, the blue house again. But this time, the door was open, and 4 smiling people stood inside.